I can't forgive you, Connor. God help me, I can't. But I won't leave you behind. I'm Eddie Webb,
And I'm Chris Spivey.
and today we talk about issue 4 of the Ultimates here on Speechless. Hello and welcome to another episode of Speechless, where we are covering the 2015's first volume of the Ultimates. And I have been reading them issue to issue, sight unseen, and so far I've been really, really enjoying this run, Chris.
So, Eddie, I'm curious who wrote or made this? I don't think we've said that yet.
I don't think I mentioned it almost every episode, but this is written by Al Ewing. Artist is Kenneth Rutherford, and color artist is Dan Brown, and lettered by VC's Joe Sabino.
I'm almost giddy from how much you're enjoying this, because I was
Mm-hmm.
hoping that you'd like it as much as I did, and I'm getting the feeling that you are. So
Yeah.
it's one of the joys of sharing something that you really enjoy with other people, and then getting to riff on it, which is why media is always so influential and important, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. And I mean, obviously, by the nature of who we are, we tend to give more inclusive media a bit more of a look in, as it were. But one of the things that's been great about this is I probably would not have picked it up without the prompting, just because it's, as we talked about before, it's primarily an Avengers book. I don't really tend to read the Avengers stuff, although I've been looking at it more and more, particularly over the past 10 years ish of Avengers stuff. Um, and because of the name, I genuinely thought it was somehow connected to the Ultimate Universe event, Ultimates, which I did not like at all. And so I was like, it's another Ultimates comic written by a Brit. I'm not sure I kind of want to do that, And you said to do it for the podcast. Like, oh yeah, sure, why not? I trust your judgment, and I'm deeply happy with it. And I get the logic. We talked about episode 1 about why it was called the Ultimates. I get the reasoning behind it, but I really think it needed a different name. I think it would have really helped it.
So then, if you're workshopping a name, what would you have renamed it?
The Marvels. Who
Just because
Marvel?
3 of the 5 members are all Marvels?
Right? Yeah, just call them the Marvels. You know, the Marvels working under either that, or it's T'Challa's Angels. One of the other ones.
Hmm. But the problem with that, though, is then you can't switch up your team that much.
Yeah, I know.
Because if T'Challa then leaves the team, who would they? They'd be like Talking Heads without the talking, which is actually a band, by the way, in case people didn't know. The Talking Heads were an awesome band. Then the lead left, and the head formed their own little band, and they had other singers come in throughout the course of the soundtrack. And the head album, I'm on a music rent now, is pretty good. I heard it when it first came out, and I bought it, and I listened to it a couple years ago, and it still stands up.
Oh, good to know. Now, I thought that story was going to end. I was like, and it sucked.
So, to long story short, coming back to this, if T'Challa leaves the team, I still think the team would be awesome even without T'Challa.
Right.
In fact, T'Challa is kind of the weakest member of the team.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because when I came into this, my main in was like, I do like this era of T'Challa, so I was kind of hoping to see more of him. And now I hear issue 4, and it's like I don't begrudge how little I've seen of him, because I'm liking what I'm learning about the other characters. Because really, at this point, T'Challa is kind of coming off as the money guy and second tier science support.
Mm-hmm. And second tier diplomat.
Right, because Carol's the main diplomat.
Which in of itself may sound kind of somewhat disparaging against T'Challa, but we're saying that he can step in to replace someone else who is a primary in that role in like 2 or 3 different fields. That is incredible. Not
Yeah.
marvelous, but incredible.
Maybe there's more stuff later on that I'm not there yet. That's fine, and maybe in future issues, or if it can go on longer. But it's funny, like more and more, While I obviously love long-running comics, I enjoy reading them, enjoy collecting them. I also do appreciate sometimes maybe a comic just needs to be 12 issues to be done, right? Or 18 issues or whatever. I'm getting a more appreciation of the kind of mini series format because I remember that was big in the 80s. We'd do 4 issues of a comic and that'd be it.
But are you
Uh,
referring more to sort of Elseworlds and What Ifs, or just
no,
in general?
no. I mean, even like in like I remember like there was a Beauty and the Beast was like a 4 issue comic run of Beauty and Beast doing an X-Men adventure together. But that was it. It was never meant to be a long running comic. It was just those four were done.
I thought you were talking about Ron Perlman and Linda Hamilton for a second.
No, no, no. I mean, also cool, but no, I'm talking about the X-Men book. So like on a conceptual level, I don't mind. Hey, we're just doing an event thing, or we're it not even has to be a big event. It's like we're just we want to put these characters together for a while and see what happens. My frustration with the Ultimates is that it's very much positioned like, no, we are a brand new team. We fill a very specific role in the Marvel universe, and they do it well. So it's set up to feel like it should be a long running book,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's frustrating about it is because I want the Ultimates to be on issue 50 now, right?
That'd been awesome, but I'm curious how that would have worked story wise.
Right, right. And maybe the answer is that, it's all Adam's team and maybe he occasionally rotates people in and out, something like that.
I don't know.
And I can also see them being, you know, swept up in other people's adventures. Like, hey, we have weird stuff on this planet. Let's bring in the Ultimates and have them help us out with it. I could see them crossing over guest booking. I think there's path through, but we talked about this last episode. I think it is agreed that ultimately it's a cool premise. It's going to be hard to maintain month to month, which means that the Ultimates probably needed something else to kind of scaffold them for more grounded, quote unquote, adventures. But I don't know. Maybe they could have folded into Alpha Flight and been like the main superhero team for Alpha Flight or Sword or something. I don't know.
Do you think that as a team, though, they would have the Superman problem that people always complain about? Is that Superman is too powerful to write just fighting people? Because as a team, they're nigh unstoppable. And individually, other than maybe T'Challa, they are all fairly super, like near cosmic tier.
Well, the Superman problem I find fascinating because it's I've actually read some interviews with people who have worked on Superman and have talked about the Superman problem, and it's weird how the good writers or people who have been seen as good afterwards never have problems writing Superman because like he's just a guy, you
Yeah.
know, and that's not the problem. I had forgotten that the woman who wrote a large chunk of New Mutants actually did write Superman in the 90s, and blanking on her name sadly. She talked about it's like no, Superman's easy to write for. He's just a guy. He's got very clear motivations and very clear problems, and just pull on those like any dramatic thing. And the fact that he's not unstoppable is kind of irrelevant.
Now, is that during John Byrne's Superman, where they powered Superman down,
No, this was
or
during the
is
Death of
that
Superman era.
okay?
This is when they had like 4 Superman comics and they had little shields and they would tell you which order to read them all in because they were basically all feeding into each other for a while. It was that era, so he was peak of his powers. Granted, he was electric for a while, but we don't talk about that. But so I mean, to my point, the one thing that the Ultimates is doing really well, Al Ewing's doing well, is setting up these are characters, and
Mm,
this is relevant to this issue because a lot of this issue is about Adam specifically as a
yeah.
character. And the fact is that all of these characters had interesting quirks and were set up to have interesting conflicts. So absolutely, as characters, it can be like, yeah, maybe we have a 4 or 5 issue run where they're not necessarily beating up a Cthulhu, to quote last issue, but maybe it's let's talk about Monica has gone too far and we have to deal with that, or maybe Carol's like I'm so disconnected from humanity anymore. I don't know why we're even doing this. Having Adam struggling with all of these damn kids getting on a space lawn, whatever. I mean, I think there's a lot there, and I really feel like Adam and T'Challa are being set up for. There's going to be not an ego conflict because, well, one, T'Challa will win, but two, Adam doesn't seem to be bringing ego to the table. But certainly, there's a methodology conflict that could see them eventually butting heads over.
Very nice.
But we didn't get that, so instead, we're going to talk about this.
So for our spotlight this week, I'm going to throw a fastball. And Eddie, we're going to talk about Black Panther, but as he was introduced in the Fantastic Four, who is Black Panther?
Okay. So Black Panther is, of course, T'Challa. He is the king of Wakanda. He was he was created by Jack Kirby, introduced into the Fantastic Four, where he was originally Cole Leopard, before he got changed to Black Panther in the actual comic, which is a way better name. And so he is
Do you
the king of
remember
Wakanda.
some of the rumor around why they changed the name originally?
If I remember correctly, the Black Panther was actually changed to the Panther or something
Cold
because
Tiger?
Cold Tiger, that was it. Because they were worried that he would be confused with the Black Panther militant group.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Jack Kirby came back, like, no, that's stupid. We're changing it back to Black Panther. And I'm Jack Kirby. You can't stop me. And they're like, all right, Jack,
King
do what you
Kirby.
want.
Kirby.
But yes, he's based. Frankly, if you don't know what Black Panther is, you should watch a Marvel movie. But he is the king of Wakanda, who is the most technologically advanced country on the planet. At this point, T'Challa is in the process of creating a space empire because it's Marvel. He was ousted as king, but has since come back as king. Because this is right after the Coates run, I think.
I think I'm
During the
kind of
Coates
spotty
run.
on that too. I've read it all, but it's all jumbled in my brain right now.
Yeah, because the problem is the Coates run is just this is one of the downsides sometimes of big companies like Marvel is that the Coates run is a very nice self-contained issue, and he was pretty good about protecting his run on Black Panther, so there wasn't a ton of crossover in and out of it. But it does mean it's harder to slot continuity wise into all the other appearances of Black Panther that were also happening at this time.
Yeah.
So he appears to still be king based on what little we saw in issue 2. But as far as the Ultimates go, that's really all I need to know because his physicality, his superpowers aren't really a factor, and that's fine. I don't. Not every issue of comic book needs to be about punching.
When in doubt, if you need an easier reference for his capabilities, and you've only read mainstream Avengers that don't have T'Challa, think of Captain America physically and Tony Stark tech and brilliant wise. Slam them together and multiply them by 3.
Yeah, basically, yeah, it is the best. Well, yeah, that's the best of both characters because he's also a patriot like Captain America, just a patriot for
Yep.
Wakanda. And also, what if Doctor Doom had slightly more tact and slightly less hatred for Reed Richards?
And you know what? Both T'Challa and Reed are disliked by Imperious Rex, so that still stands.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
because Namor is an asshole.
Oh, love it. Thank you for playing the fastball special game that you're not expecting.
No worries, because you're gonna have to help me next one because I don't know as much about our last one. But anything else before we dive into issue 4?
Just that T'Challa is a great character and people should give him more respect. Although there's been character assassination of T'Challa now for the past few years in comics.
Yeah, no,
Moving on,
we mentioned it
like
before, but
hard assassination.
right, we mentioned it before, but I think the two best runs are the Coates run we mentioned, and also the Christopher Priest run from the '90s. Those are both really good runs of Black Panther. If you want to check them out.
He also for a
Also, the
while,
Jungle Action, even though it's a horrible comic title, the Jungle Action run in the '70s is also pretty good too.
and he also was Daredevil for a while too,
What?
punching up people. Yeah, I think there was a while where he wasn't the king of Wakanda anymore. Matt Murdock was doing something else, and T'Challa took on the mantle of Daredevil for a little bit.
Oh my God.
What? It's like the Ronin costume. Sometimes it just get passed around.
Why would the king? Never mind. That was probably before he was really the critical king of Wakanda in terms of standing.
And so, once again, since we're going to get into it, mine has this little recap
Yeah. Is that the same
So
art from last issue?
it is. They just changed the boxes, which I think is brilliant. In this one, it gives a recap of the last issue. It says Dr. Bashir talks about how they brought in Giant Man to help them with the device. They're focused on time streams. They're heading out to the neutral zone. But what I really want to go into is like all the thought bubble. The word bubble is what Adam is saying out loud to everyone else recapping.
Mhm.
And then you have his actual thought boxes below that. Blue Marvel private log. Wasn't expecting to encounter anyone out here, least of all a man who should be dead at my hands. Leaving this off the official record for now. And that's how that panel
Nice.
ends.
Nice. Again, I love when those recaps actually bring a little bit of flavor and character to the story. So we start in 1951 Korea, actually. And we see Adam Brashear, age 22, and Connor Sims, age 23. They are both in the Marine Corps. Adam Brashear is a private. This is his first day of combat, and Connor Sims is a sergeant, and it is very nearly his last. And Connor is shot to hell. Looks like there's been a crashed jeep in the background. There's a dead Korean soldier on the ground, and Adam Brashear standing there, bloodied but not broken, with a gun in his hand, saying, "We will leave no one behind." And specifically cites Nemo Residio, which is going to be important throughout this issue. We jump to 1960, Project Perseus, which is a top secret energy facility and also was a weird running subplot with the Thing for a while.
Really? Huh.
Oh no, I'm thinking of Pegasus. I'm sorry, I think Project Pegasus,
Okay.
not Perseus. So many projects. No, so this is now Adam Bashir's doctor. He only has 2 PhDs in 1960, so starting slow. But he's meeting up again with Connor, and they're talking about a reactor, but they're not really. It's not really a reactor. It's him basically a device that will channel into the neutral zone, which he has already discovered and published a paper on, as we learned out last issue. Basically, they're trying to pull stable antimatter from there to here. And I kind of want to pause here because at this point in reading it is when I realized that Blue Marvel is the protagonist for this comic. It was a little unclear previously, or I should say at least the protagonist for this 6-issue spread. Because way back in issue 1, he talked about how he'd been struggling for years to pull stable antimatter in, and now suddenly the ISO 8 has happened, and he wants to investigate that. And so here we see he's been wanting to do that since 1960. And so, and of course, as the issue goes on, this whole issue centered around Blue Marvel in some way. So it's it was implied that he was, if not the person who created the Ultimates, at least one of the people who created the Ultimates. And now we're seeing another one of his long-term research projects is now coming back to the fore. So I find it interesting that this is a stealth Blue Marvel comic now, which I like. I
I
like Blue Marvel.
don't disagree at all. I myself love it.
And so Connor points out that there's a military application for stable antimatter, which, yes, there is. And Adam's like, no, I'm done. I'm done with war. I want to help do something to the world. And he reiterates something we saw again in the earlier issues. This is a problem that he wants to solve. And so basically it comes down to the government is funding this project. Connor's word that it's going to become used for military applications. Adams, I need to appreciate I appreciate the funding and a need for a defense, but that's not where I want this project to go. And
And do you see the
so,
riff right here also if you look at it somewhat to Iron Man? Because if we look at it being in the 60s, Iron Man from the 60s, Iron Man was a billionaire making weapons for the government. And we have Adam here who is brilliant in trying to build something to not be a weapon, the government trying to take it to some extent, but
mhm,
receiving funding from the government for a weapon. Like they're tangential parallels that they're creating for the character since they're sort of retconning them into existence.
right. So he's a bit like Reed Richards, but does not have Reed Richards' resources. And so he has to make moral compromises, which again, very interesting. And then there's an explosion.
And when you turn the page, this is where I was going to make my Reed Richards comparison,
Mhm.
because Reed is the reason all the Fantastic Four have their powers. And you have a similar thing here where it's Adam's fault that Connor now has powers and is somewhat beginning to change physically, kind of how the Thing changed physically, because Reed and Ben were best friends. Adam and Connor are best friends.
And there's a great moment here because one of the things I appreciate about what little I read of Blue Marvel prior to this is how much they tried to make it feel like it came from the comic era that it was essentially set in. So his major villain is Anti-Man, which sounds like a dumb 60s supervillain name, because he's made of antimatter and he's a man, ergo Anti-Man. And so there's a little line in here. It's like, where Connor's looking at his hands, he's seeing, the universe unfolding in front of him. He's recognizing how the universe is put together. And he's like, we're just like ants, man, just ants. And the fact that Al Ewing took the time to go, I'm going to retcon something that is ostensibly 45 years old, but is actually 2 or 3 years old to make it, because it's the kind of thing that I would do if it were a 60s super character in a 2015 comic, is a brilliant level of meta that just did not need to fucking happen, and I am here for it.
And this goes back to the thing that we talked about for some of the MCU run, is that when you're creating something, you need someone that loves the material and the medium to be a part of it, because that is how you get nuggets like that.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like if it's just been a person that, yeah, I write comics, I'm good at it, you wouldn't have gotten that extra layer of detail. It's someone that loves the medium and the things they're working with.
Right.
Which that is what I mean when it says it makes a difference. It's not necessarily noticeable to a normal reader, but to a deep-rooted fan of comics like yourself, bam,
Mm-hmm.
you see it and you feel it.
Right. And then we cut to Adam's now clearly remembering this, and they've changed his, now it's Dr. Adam Bashir, age 87, because earlier he was age 22. And so it's a nice little nod to time is passing, but also living antimatter reactor and super genius. And I have to say, it was this page, this moment, and I'm surprised it took this long, frankly, because I know how my brain works, but I was surprised it took this long for me to look at this page and read Super Genius in the Wile E. Coyote voice. Adam Brashear, Super Genius. But because the comic is not, Adam is in a very specific place and role, and super geniuses are frankly a pretty common trope. The fact that they're taking the time to really emphasize this is the important part of the character we care about for this comic is relevance, but that specific word is also weird to a very specific age group. So this is to counterpoint the people who will love comics. Is also someone maybe was a bit too far, maybe mined a bit too deeply into that.
And for you to point that out, I also want to parallel that. The reason I love they focus on that is because they've had the Hulk come around decimating people. Adam shows up and knocks the Hulk out.
Right.
Like that is his level of power. And instead of focusing on that aspect of it, it's more of his super genius part, which is displayed all the way up to here. We're going to tackle a Galactus problem. Did it. All right, we're going to go tackle time. Did it. Almost done. But we're not thinking about the impacts once again and the ripple effects of doing those. Like major problem tackled. Yeah, let's move on to the next major problem.
I mean, to be honest, the
Super
only time he
genius.
shows any of his powers is really issue 1, and that's important because issue 1, if you're interested in a team, you've got to have everyone do at least a little bit of their power thing. That's just a requirement for a first issue of a run. So I don't begrudge them at all for doing that. But you're right. There's a reason why it took me so long to kind of ping onto that was because specifically the story and the writing and the arts and the everything is really reinforcing he genuinely is in fact a genius, and that is the part that we care about him, so it makes sense to reiterate it.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
And again, perfect use of continuity. Carol's having ongoing memory problems at this point, which, if I remember, tied to some of her reclaiming some bits from Rogue, but not entirely.
I think I'm fuzzy on that too.
But anyway, it
And because they were
allows
also doing a retcon of Carol, I think around this time,
right.
which goes to like her mom actually being Kree and her kind of being actually like half Kree originally and not getting
Right, that
powers
was
from
it, because
Marvel.
they revealed that all that was programming, and that programming starting to unravel. That's what's going on at this point in time.
So
Yeah. Okay. But anyway, it is a nice use for them to have Carol very naturally say, "Tell me who Anti-Man is," because this character is supposed to have been part of the Marvel Universe for a long period of time, and so all these characters should theoretically know this. But because Carol is in a moment of continuity where she may not know this, it doesn't feel forced.
mm-hmm.
And so they cut to a great panel of what is clearly kind of early 80s Marvel, because we see Carol in her Ms. Marvel outfits with the black with the bolt. We see Reed in the blue Fantastic Four costume. We see the She-Hulk in her purple swimsuits. And we see, I believe it's Ares when he was in the Avengers. Am I right on that?
I want to say that was 90s or early 2000s.
The past Marvel, yeah.
No, because that's around the time Ares was actually on one of the Avengers teams and was running around. Because it was
Right.
Ares would have been on after the Dark Avengers.
Yeah, I see that She-Hulk is barefoot and has her fingerless gloves. So yeah, I think it may have been the early 90s. You're right.
And because if you also look, you see Sentry, and Sentry didn't show up to 2000s.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, this century. Okay. Yeah, no. Okay. There you go. We
And
have forced it.
Sentry was another retconned character too, and Sentry became like the ultimate powerful person. So that's why having Sentry being thrown aside like nothing, the Worf maneuver from Star Trek, just
Right.
demonstrates the power of the villain.
Right. And so we see Adam's wife being killed in this scene, and so he segues into him remembering that he was an old enemy. It turned to a public battle, and his wife died. And
And for people that may not remember from the first episode where I mentioned it, Adam's wife was also sort of a sleeper shield agent to keep tabs on.
right, and she then basically flipped and decided she cared more about Adam than working for Shield.
Yeah.
And so Monica reassures him, and again, Monica is listed as living energy in human shape. So the comic is steadily also defining her differently as she goes on this journey, which is I love. It's a small detail, but I love it. And also, and Adam's like, there's no time. We need to stop him. And T'Challa, stop him or end him. I need to be clear on this point.
And then you get T'Challa's box, which everyone else's has been somewhat smaller. His is more drawn out. King T'Challa of Wakanda, royal title Black Panther, heightened senses, reactions, and physical attributes, global political powerhouse. Like,
Yeah.
ugh.
And it's because previous issue, I think I skipped over it. He was just political powerhouse. Now he's global political powerhouse. So yeah, his box gets bigger and bigger and bigger each time. I love. But again, T'Challa's just like, do we need to murder this guy? Because I'll straight up murder this guy for you. It's like, whoa, just pilot the plane, roll it back, buddy. And then America Chavez, again, I love this. She's just listed as paramedic for the multiverse, which is a great title.
Mhm.
So good. And it's not one we've seen before. Because everything else has been like, she punches really good. She punches but does multiverse stuff. Now she's a paramedic. And it shows that each of these things are all true, but also shows that these are layered, complex characters that we're starting to continually recontextualize, frankly, issue by issue, which is great.
Amazingly well done.
And so America's like, what do you need? And Adam's like, you know the area, so you deal with the fauna. And he talks to Carol and is like, we need the exploration armor. And so we cut to the Marvels. Well, Carol and Adam dressed in space armor. They're specifically exploration armor Mark 13. Ultra high density plating provides shielding from matter-antimatter fluctuations. Internal quantum probability regulators protect against existential discorporation. Projected survival time 9 minutes 15 seconds.
And you see them in armor, but you have Monica just in an energy form
Yeah.
not at all phased.
Yep. Just an energy. And of course, the suits happen to look a lot like their outfits, but are in slightly different textures. Adams is a little more kind of bulkier and chunkier. Um, Carol's is a bit thick, but the thing I love about Carol's is like not only does it have a little belt to mimic her sash, but also her helmet has a yellow fin at the back to mimic her faux hawk when she puts her face mask on.
I love it so
And I'm like,
much.
T'Challa fucking made these. I know he did. Oh, and they're so good. And so they leave to go talk to Anti-Man, and he's like, Adam, is that you? And we cut to 1961, the neutral zones is 1 year after the explosion. And we see Adam in another set of exploration armor. This is the Mark One. Survival time 1 minute 50 seconds at best, is what it says. And so, what this does, and something that does really well and I love, is you cannot get around the fact that Blue Marvel just did not exist prior to several years ago, right? So they're trying to
Mhm.
retcon him in. But what Al Ewing, again, gets about comics is that because we're bouncing back and forth in time, we need to find ways to make it feel like retroactively Adam has contributed heavily to the Marvel Universe. And so we started this up by setting up the neutral zone. Here's a whole new zone you never heard about, but Adam's been familiar with it since 1960. And now within 2 pages, he's like, let's get the exploration armor, a concept he's very familiar with. And then we see it, and it's like exploration armor. It's Mark 13. Here's how it does. And the next page is like, here's the first version. Adam's also in it. So within 2 pages, we established exploration armor as a thing. It's important for neutralizing its neutral zone, and Adam is very familiar with it and probably invented it. And so it makes him feel like, oh yeah, he's always been here, even though intellectually we know he hasn't.
Love every part about that.
Yes, and we see a bug floating around and another kind of crystalline planty thing, and we see Adam floating in an energy form into the neutral zone, and so uh, Adam's trying to grab Connor. I've got you. I've got you. He grabs him. Says you're coming home. And again, this whole 2 page spread is very kind of deep kind of rust colored background with a glowing blue and white portal, popping yellow energy form, and then the page turn and we're in a hospital, and the colors are very natural looking initially. And so we find out that Connor is dying because he spent 10 months trapped in the neutral zone, and that seems to change him. But as Connor's kind of trying to understand that you're realizing how small we are, I saw things that weren't word for. There's a cage around us, and we close on his eyes, and his eyes are glowing, and we realize that Connor is not mentally well. He is going insane. He talks about being in a cage, and then we hard cut to 1962, where he's now fully in his anti-man costume, helmet over his face, cape, shoulder pads, the whole 9 yards. And now he's talking about how society is the cage, and suppress the other, give into the fear, and it rewards you, it molds you into a shape. Um, and one of the things that we haven't talked about because it was in the original Blue Marvel comics, and they just touching on here and glowing away, is the fascinating conflict between Anti-Man and Blue Marvel. Is that Anti-Man's looking at the inequities of the 1960s and going, we need to tear it down. He is an old school anarchist, but all the points he's making are points that are valid from a 1960s perspective. But it's also interesting because it's the kind of thing that you couldn't have put in a comic in the 1960s.
Yeah.
It is, however, the kind of thing that you could see a 2015, 2010 writer adding on to a character from the 1960s and saying that anarchism actually had a valid point. And Blue Marvel, because he's a traditional 60s character, stands for status quo, stands for American values. But again, even his So what happened is that, again, this is a relationship that didn't exist, but you can, in your mind's eye, see it as being Blue Marvel being kind of the very Superman style truth, justice, the American way thing, and Ant-Man being kind of just I'm going to destroy things because I'm a cackling supervillain, and then a layer of that complexity being put on retroactively. But it starts in these comics, right? So again, it's a very deft way of saying you can see the archetypes he's drawing from, but they didn't actually exist. So Connor and Adam have a valid point. Connor came from the Korean War and basically believes that society is ultimately for blame. And so he continues in that vein. I need to destroy. I was trained to destroy. I need to continue to destroy. Adam turned his back on war and destruction and wants to build. He wants to create. And that is the core conflict. And all of that comes from 3 panels of this comic, right? That entire conflict is just Anti-Man ranting about destroying civilization or we'll die like a failed species, and him saying, I can't let you do that. It's the only way they'll understand. I know this going in because I did some pre-reading before I read this series, but even if I didn't, I would still get the essences of that very nuanced conversation in just this 2-page spread. Al Ewing is very good at distilling things and making them feel like they've always been there. I'm going to keep doing that a lot, I think, but it's just this issue in particular is really relevant because it is about a heavy retcon.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is, then we cut back to 1961, and Connor's like, I keep seeing flashes. So what we realize is that Anti-Man is kind of disjointed in time, which was something that I did not get when I read the original Blue Marvel comics. But it's a
So
neat touch.
before you move on too much, I do want to take a beat to talk about the costumes that they're wearing, because you
Oh
have
yeah, sure.
Anti-Man's that's there with like that helmet with it shows his lower part of his jaw,
Hmm.
and you have Blue Marvel, who we can assume to be Blue Marvel just from like who he's interacting with, completely covered, like
Yes.
full face mask, everything, exposing nothing of the person,
Hmm.
which is incredibly relevant to the Blue Marvel history, because if you read the comic, that's how he did most of his superheroics. And the moment when America saw that it was a black man saving them, the president asked him to stop being a superhero. And
Right.
that's when you get to see Adam's true, at the time, for him, heroism, by saying, my country had asked me to do this thing and not use these abilities I have because they would cause racial tension and things. And he stops being a hero and goes into retirement. And that's how the Marvel Universe also explains him not being active for like 40 years.
Hmm. And again, yeah, you're right. It's like this is I keep going back to this, but like it's a very fast moving comic in the sense of it trusts you to know, okay, we made it clear that Connor is Anti-Man. Anti-Man's clearly ranting here. He's punching somebody. It's got to be Blue Marvel. It's got to be Adam. It doesn't spell that out. It trusts you to let, and also trust the artist to visually convey that. And so Adam's like, hey, whatever you're going through, Connor, I'll help you. We'll stick together. And Connor's like, yeah, sure. Nemo Residio, right? And then we cut to the modern day where Anti-Man is, reiterating Nemo Residio. I think I lost control. Uh, and so we realize that Anti-Man again is experiencing things out of chronological order. So this Anti-Man that's here thinks he is the Anti-Man from 1961, which is before he killed Adam's wife. And Adam punches him, just clocks him, just shut up. And Monica and Carol are like, yep, let's get ready. It's let him do his thing, but be ready for anything. And Adam's like, no, he's not just trouble. He's dangerous. We can't let him get away. We can't let him escape. And just continuing to punch on him.
Which
And
is
that,
a vastly different take now on the character than what we've had all the way up to now, who's been calm, rational for everything, even encountering Galactus like Cthulhu's, all of it, no big deal. And here you see all that intellect and everything else go to the side, and it's pure emotionally driven right now.
I mean, this is the guy who 1 issue ago was sitting back, relaxing in a conference chair with a water bottle, going, "Yeah, we reprogrammed Galactus, no big."
Mm-hmm.
And now he is just unhinged. And so Connor's explaining nothing made sense. Everything was hurt. I was paranoid. I was having these thoughts. I didn't mean to hurt people. And well, actually, he says, "I think I hurt people." And Adam's like, "You think?" And he's like, I told you I forgave you, but I can't. I just can't. And I won't." And then we switch. We see a page turn, and there's another glowing figure, this time glowing white. And this turns out to be Kevin Brashear, who is the first person to lead the Omniverse. And this turns out to be Adam's son. And this is the point where I genuinely do not know what is being referenced here. I don't know if you do or not.
I vaguely remember. All I know is that the Anti-Man caused him to lose pretty much his entire family. That's all I got right now because it's been a
Okay.
while since I've read it.
So Carol's about to blast him, but Monica does know Kevin. And again, conveniently explains for the reader that he got lost in the neutral zone, got mutated into a cosmic being, and he's kind of the guardian of the neutral zone. And so Kevin's like, "What are you doing?" And Adam's explaining, "He murdered your mother. He's murdered so many people." And it's like, "Well, how many people did Galactus kill?" And so Adam's like,
Mm-hmm.
"I'm saying Galactus is a universal force." And Kevin's like, "Yeah, everyone is. Everyone has the ability to change the world. So that makes Anti-Man no different than Galactus. And he even changed your life." And forces Adam to start remembering something that he doesn't want to remember. And there's a great moment of like, it cuts one panel to, in the middle of a conversation, Adam's talking about, "I've been working on this thing," and it's obviously Anti-Man helmet. And then we cut back the next panel to the modern day. It's like, no, 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 no. And then we cut again to that scene. So like, there's actually a visual moment of Adam trying not to remember. The story actually pulls back from that memory before it goes back into the memory. It's a
So well
little
done.
touch, but again, the visual storytelling is fantastic on this. And so turns out that Adam created the helmet to try to control Connor's visions. And Adam's like, "No, that's not what happens." And Kevin's like, "But it is." And so Adam finally says, "Connor, you have a problem. It needs to be solved." And so and that goes back to the line I said before. It's like, "I can't forgive you, but I won't leave you behind." So we'll put him in the ship. He's got a high density hull, so hopefully that will help him protect him from the chaos of the neutral zone. And so Carol's
Do,
like, "Oh, go ahead."
no, I was just going to say, if you're done, that
I
during
was
all
going to wrap up
this,
that Carol's like, "What's the play?" And he's like, "We're going to continue the mission, but he's coming with us now."
and during all this, you see that both Adam and Carol are in suits. Monica's flying around in energy form. And in the background, you see Miss America punching out a Cthulhu, not in armor or anything, just in physical form with no protection in this space that the others need to be protected from. Like another little cue about how powerful she is and what she does.
Yeah, she just pops out of a star, bam. And again, another visual storytelling is like, there are no action lines. You just see the star behind her, and she's leaning forward about to punch, and there's a Cthulhu kind of in front of her. So just by the placement of the art, and again, yeah, you're right, it's happening in the background. And then when they go flying back to the ship, you see in the corner this tiny little star again, as you know, America's started in, punch this guy, start away, back to the ship. You don't need to tell people; they just need to be presented
Mm-hmm.
visually well.
Oh,
And we see that the helmet that we just saw was protecting Connor's visions is now floating in the neutral zone away from them as they leave.
so well done.
And then, so normally, previously, this would be the okay. We've wrapped up, we've solved this problem. We've solved the problem of Connor, but we actually cut to Galactus, who's now the Lifebringer. He's back on his world ship and he's talking to someone who speaks in blue bubbles, speech bubbles. And his title actually specifically has changed to Galactus, the Lifebringer, Seeker of Worlds.
And he's gold. I'd like to point out his
He,
color scheme has also changed.
yes, he's gold and white. And he's talking to something, and talks about the humans who brought this on to you are heading outside the Omniverse. They will find themselves behind something beyond even my influence, whoever the speaker is. They've seen things that not even you have seen before. They will see the truth. You need to spare them that knowledge. And Galactus says, yes, I'll go deal with them, find them. And basically, the Force says, you do what you must. And we turn a page, again, last page, splash page, and we see it is eternity. It is the literal manifestation of the universe is talking to Galactus. And there we go. It ends with, Ultimates in Nemo Residio.
So well done.
And the one thing I like about I mean, obviously it's the last two pages. We have to get we've talked before about the last page splash reveal, which the team have done a really good job with thus far. But the title of this is Nemo Residio, No Man Leave Behind. And it's obviously the theme of this is that marine esprit de corps and how that plays into Adam and Connor's current relationship. But by the framing of this, by putting it here, it's interesting because it ties that very human relationship to this extremely cosmic conversation, which goes back to my earlier point. It's almost like we planned this about how I think this could have gone on longer because already here we are in issue 4, and Ewing and Rocafort are doing a good job of saying, no, we can balance the human and the cosmic, because this story is frankly about two friends who fell out. It's really what this story is about. And it also is acting as a cosmic metaphor for matter and antimatter. It's also acting as a quiet recapping of Blue Marvel's story for people who may not be familiar with it. It's also acting as an inciting incident for bringing the plot from the first 2 issues back to issue 5. It's doing a lot, but the heart of that story is just Adam and Connor realizing that they went 2 different directions, and Adam realizing that his friend is ill and that what he did may not be his fault, and Adam having to come to terms with that.
Very well said.
This comic is so good, Chris.
and to think that you just passed it by on the shelf.
I did. I genuinely did. I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't care about this. And it's good. It's very good.
I think you've actually recapped your thoughts. I was going to ask you. So, any closing thoughts about issue 4?
I still think it's great. I mean, I don't know. It reminds me of why I love these kinds of comics, right? It reminds me of why I love with this medium. I've said it before, but I keep saying it. It reminds me of the comics I read growing up in a lot of ways, frankly. It feels like what I loved about the 80s Fantastic Four and X-Men comics. The sense of interesting team dynamics and bombastic setting plots tied with very human components and interesting characters and fun dialogue and bizarre concepts. These are all the things that I loved about that era of comics, and it's not told in 5 minutes of reading, right? It feels like it's a nice meaty thing. Like when we first said this, I was like, I don't know if we're going to do an hour in each issue because these, the modern comics are so deconstructed. But this feels like an older, denser comic.
If I hadn't remembered the little bit I had about it, I would have had a similar thought because it doesn't have as much meat in it as we'll say the Armor Wars did, because like those issues were packed full of panels, full of words constantly throughout it. But these have a flavor of that with a modern vibe to it and meaning written into like the art in each panel. How we keep talking about even the art is telling a story in addition to the story that's being told on top of it, which easily makes it more interesting.
Yeah, it is a comic that rewards careful reading, whereas so many comics are just designed to be consumed. modern day. This is one where if you pay attention to what's going on, again, if you pay attention to the art, like you're saying, the color, all that's helping you to emphasize and enhance the story, which is just fantastic.
So much so that even I left my graphic novel out because I have the physical version too, and I was reading that the other day because I got ahead in my reading by like a day, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. And my kid saw it when I was done, picked it up, and started reading it, and she's enjoying.
That's amazing.
And
That's super cool.
part of it is it's very well written, it's very well drawn, but also I'm going to stress it at the end of the episode, the effortless representation in the book. They're just characters doing what they do.
Right.
Marvel has a
Because
deep bench of characters like this that they just don't use.
right, and that's the thing is like you absolutely could see a version of this comic that has Reed Richards and Tony Stark and all of that. You know, you could see a version of this comic that used a lot of Caucasian men. The fact that it doesn't, and it's not the fact that these are not Caucasian men is not a part of the book. It's just no, these are cool characters that can also do these amazing stuff, and let's challenge ourselves to drag on this deep bench and put together a comic that could have been done with white men, but doesn't need to be. And because these are characters that don't get enough spotlight, it adds a level of interest to that. Because like this could have been another Reed and Doctor Doom story, but it's not. And because it's not, they can do different things with it and tell different stories with that. And I like that.
And at the heart of it, I think that is what they meant to do with the all new, all different Marvel, joking aside. And they stumbled. Like, I don't think some of the other books were on par with the writing that this has. And then when they started getting pushback from small minded, I'll say primarily probably white males,
Mm-hmm.
they buckled like a belt and started changing things back. If you make a course change, you have to stick with it for like the long run because it's going to take a while, but people don't do it. Same thing
Yeah,
with Davison as the Fifth Doctor after Baker.
right. I mean, same and like Marvel has found success with Captain Marvel, with Ms. Marvel. The new versions. They did a really good job with that, and they said that if you stick with it and if you ride it out, people will gravitate to it. I I
As long as it's
continue to
quality.
right, and that's the thing is this is quality. I genuinely think a lot of it is just the messaging. I I keep getting hung up on the name. I know I probably shouldn't, but I feel like if this had been advertised slightly differently, branded slightly differently, something, I feel like it would have latched on and found a strong core audience. But it is infuriating how good this comic is.
Because people probably might have had a similar thought as you, and they saw the Ultimates. Are like, I don't want to read about Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver doing the deed, or I don't want to read about a near fascist Captain America or the Hulk eating the Wasp.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
By the way, folks, that all happened in the Ultimates run.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
It's not me being hyperbolic like normal.
Think you was it Garth Ennis that wrote those? Pretty sure it was.
I don't remember. It was.
Whatever.
I stopped reading it. So Eddie, if people, sorry, any closing thoughts before we wrap up episode 4?
I'm really looking forward to issue 5, and I'm mad at myself for the constraints I put upon myself. Because like I want to just every time I finish it, I want to just keep reading, but no, we committed to a certain course. I'm going to stay the course, but I guarantee you, Chris, after we're done with this run of Speechless, I'm going to read the rest of this. Get on Marvel Unlimited and just read the rest of it.
All right. If people are looking to connect with you online or to buy your sweet, sweet swag, where can they go?
You can find me most anywhere online as Pugsteady. That's Pugsteady. That's my website. That's my social media. That's my Patreon. If you want to buy some short stories of Pugmire. But most places you could find me on is the Darker Hue Discord, where Chris and I hang out pretty regularly and just chat about whatever's on our minds.
True that. If you're looking for me, you can get my stuff on the Dark Hue Studio website. You can go to Chaosium's website and buy Harlem Unbound 2nd edition. If you're looking just to chat with me, come into the Discord. It's the best place to be. You know what? I may even post up an invite link today on the social medias just to see if we get one straggler that comes in to see if we talk to it.
Let's
Just
find more
because.
people. So with that, we will see you next week with issue 5 of the Ultimates. See you then.